everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on tech solutions for navigating EU climate rules. I'm Catherine Nicholson from Sweep. I want to thank you all very much for joining us today. We're going to be sharing insights for you, US companies, on navigating, in particular, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, which I'm sure you've all heard of. And we'll be talking as well about corresponding best practices when it comes to getting your sustainability data in order. Now, for today's webinar, we've got two experts on hand who are going to dive into both the policy side of this and the technical product details about how you and your organizations can get yourselves prepared. So I'm thrilled to introduce our two featured speakers. We have Julien Denormandie, our Chief Impact Officer at Sweep. Julien is a former French government minister alongside President Emmanuel Macron. He understands the CSRD inside and out, and we're very excited to have his insights as a true regulations expert and a European Union insider. We also have with us Laura Zhu, a senior product manager from Arcadia, who has launched multiple data-based products used by businesses in both the US and here in Europe, where I am today. She's familiar with the challenges that multinational businesses have to navigate and how software solutions can help. They'll also be filling you in on our exciting new partnership between Sweep and Arcadia, and how together we are better positioned to support US companies in getting compliant with these sometimes tricky EU rules. So we'd love to get your questions today for Julien and Laura. Please do type them into the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. They'll come through to me and I will be putting those to our speakers for you a little bit later on. So before we get started with Julien and Laura, let's get an overview of the CSRD itself. Just to give you its headline aims, it's about improving the quality and comparability of sustainability reporting and driving the transition to a low carbon economy of the future. Now, many US organizations will have to comply with the CSRD, even though it is a European Union regulation. And there are risks of non-compliance, financial penalties, reputational damage, market access restrictions, or possibly legal action. Now, there are some compliance challenges that we're going to be talking you through today as well, from large volumes of data to this double materiality approach, which can seem quite mysterious at first, limited and reasonable assurance becoming mandatory for this as well, and the multiple stakeholders who will be involved across your internal departments, also your supply chain, your value chain. We're going to come to all that in more detail, though, with the true experts, Julien and Laura. Just before we come to them, I'll introduce the two companies a little bit more for you as well. So Arcadia, first off, is a data platform that connects businesses to global utility data, so essential for this kind of reporting. Arcadia's tools will help you to access your data and make it reporting ready. And Sweep is the all-in-one platform to help organizations act on carbon and ESG data, from mapping to measuring, reducing to reporting. It's an enterprise-ready solution to help companies scale their climate action all the way across teams, supply chains, and portfolios quickly and in a cost-effective way. So remember, do send us your questions as we go along. Right now, I'm going to hand it over to Laura and Julien for their fireside chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Catherine, for helping us set the background as we delve into some of the specific details. Julien, let's start with the basics. At a glance, CSRD can seem like quite a broad policy that covers a wide range of areas, as Catherine mentioned. Can you talk us through the key aspects of CSRD to our audience and any compliance challenges you might foresee?
Thank you so much, Laura. Definitely, CSRD is actually covering a huge bunch of areas, not only environmental issue, but also social and governance ones. Let's say that this regulation is a very ambitious one and very comprehensive as well. CSRD is part of the whole environmental EU policy, and let's say CSRD is one of the most important pillars of EU policy. For the first time, for instance, this regulation will be totally mandatory. For the first time, a huge range of companies will have to apply it, more than 50,000 companies. And as you can see on the screen, a new concept has been introduced. This concept is called the double materiality approach. It means that you will have to report on the impact of your organization activities on people and environment, but also you will have to report on the sustainability matters affecting your organization's activities. And on top of that, a huge amount of indicators will have to be populated. More than 1,200. Some data are quantitative, other ones are qualitative. And those indicators will concern not only carbon emissions, but also water, waste, and the different environmental fields. Other ones will concern social issues, but also governance issues. And finally, what is very important to keep in mind is that all those indicators will have to be auditable. You don't only have to apply CSRD, you will have to comply with the CSRD regulation to get a stamp of approval from an auditor. What does it mean? It means that extra financial, no financial data will have the same level of auditability as financial data. In other words, extra financial data will get the same importance as financial data.
Thanks for the overview, Julien. As I'm listening to all of these requirements, I'd love to ask you to help our audience, who are mostly US-based businesses that have a presence in Europe, to understand how CSRD is relevant to them. Can you tell us more about who specifically has to comply with CSRD?
Yes, for sure. And this is absolutely a very important question. So as I told you, at the time being, more than 50,000 companies will have to apply CSRD. And here you have the precise CSRD timeline. Regarding US companies, two main topics to be noticed. The first one is EU legal entities, even if belonging to US group, will have to comply with CSRD by 2026 based on 2025 fiscal year, as long as they fit at least two of the following criteria: more than 250 employees, more than 50 million of euros in terms of net turnover, and more than 25 million of euros in terms of balance sheet. And on the second part, US group and US parent company will have to comply with CSRD by 2029 based on 2028 fiscal year, as long as they fit the following criteria: net turnover exceeding 150 million of euro in the EU area in each of the last 2 years, and at the same time having a subsidiary considered as a large company or a branch in the EU area. So to sum up, it's a pretty difficult timeline to understand, but this is very clear that US company will have to apply the CSRD regulation either in 2026 based on 2025 fiscal year or in 2029 based on 2028 fiscal year. It's very important to have this timeline in mind, because if you are a US company making business within the EU area, you will have one day or another to apply CSRD regulation. And in addition to this timeline, a very important point to keep in mind is that at the time being, many European companies that have to apply CSRD will ask their own supplier to accelerate their CSR policy, since CSRD will cover what we call the scope 3. In other words, these EU companies will ask for now their own supplier, even their US supplier, to apply CSRD in advance, and even if they are not officially concerned. We've got many examples of such a situation, but probably you have seen this situation in terms of business. If you are dealing with EU company and if you are selling some goods to EU company which have to apply the CSRD from now, probably they will ask you as a US company to apply in advance the CSRD regulation.
Thank you, Julien. With all of that timeline details in mind, can you tell us a little bit more about how CSRD is changing the ways companies approach managing their sustainability data, and if you have any recommendations you might have for our audience to stay compliant?
Yeah, for sure. And what is very important to keep in mind is probably two main changes. The first change is due to the number of indicators. As I told you, CSRD will require more than 1,200 indicators to be populated in different formats, in different sources, in different security levels, different updates frequency with different roles, permissions, and validation workflows. What does it mean? It means that CSRD project will have to be a data project. It will be absolutely impossible to handle with CSRD regulation without having this data approach. This is a data project. And all those data will need to be granular, will need to be transparent and very precise. It won't be possible to handle with it without a data approach and a data management platform. And the second main change is due to the auditable approach we just discussed earlier, Laura. At the beginning, the EU Commission will impose what we call a limited insurance. In a couple of years, it will be a reasonable insurance. And this last one, this reasonable insurance, is actually the same level of auditability as we already have for financial data, meaning that every data will have to be monitored, justified, every change will have to be tracked and justified, every end result will have to be audited by an auditor, and the CSRD disclosure at the end of the day will not be only a report published and sent to the EU Commission, or it will not be only a report published on your website, it will be a report sent under this, what we call XBRL format, meaning the same format as the one used today for financial reporting, and it will be as well a validation, a stamp from an auditor on this report. And on top of that, CSRD will impose some governance changes inside your company. I think this point is very important as well. Since the CSRD report cannot be managed only by CSR department, you will have to involve your IT department, your financial department, your procurement department. All the different departments of your company will have to be committed on the CSRD if you want to disclose the CSRD regulation. And at the end of the day, what you can see on the screen is the different milestones for successful CSRD reporting. Probably the first step will be the double materiality assessment and planning. The second step will be the data collection and stakeholders involvement. The third one will be the auditing and report publication. And the last one, last but not least, will be the performance improvement. Why this last milestone is so important? It's only because CSRD is not only a disclosure project, it's not only a reporting requirement regulation. It's also, I'm totally convinced of that, it's also a way to improve your own environmental footprint. It's also a way to improve the environmental, social, and governance footprint of your company.
Thank you for the policy background and getting to especially the specific milestones of what our audience should be looking out for. Now that we've established an understanding of the what, I'd love to start talking more about the how. What are some of the specific data requirements of CSRD, and how do they differ from, say, other regulatory frameworks?
Actually, Laura, we've got significant differences between CSRD and other regulation. That's absolutely obvious, especially when you compare CSRD with the US regulation. As previously said, CSRD will not cover only carbon, but a bunch of environmental indicators and a bunch of social and governance indicators as well. Compared to the US regulation, CSRD will include the scope 3. At the time being, the US regulation covers only scope 1 and 2, except for companies with headquarters in California. Compared to other regulation, and especially international framework based on ISSB or GRI, CSRD will impose the double materiality approach and not the single one, meaning including both financial and impact materiality, and not only the financial materiality. Transparency maybe is also a key element. Since every data will have to be audited, transparency will be required by the EU Commission. And an additional point, if I may, Laura, beyond CSRD regulation, there is a matter, and there will be a matter of responsibility. What is the EU Commission looking for? The EU Commission is looking for making every company responsible for its environmental and social impacts, and responsibility all among the value chain of the company, meaning including all the suppliers. Probably a further step will happen with a coming EU regulation under discussion, which is called CS3D. And as a former French minister, I can tell you that the EU Commission will remain very ambitious on that issue. So here you have the big picture of the CSRD, but the CSRD will be only the first step, and additional coming EU regulation will probably happen in the coming years.
I'd love to delve a little bit more detail into those 1,200 data points you mentioned. I believe they're all categorized according to strict reporting standards called ESRS, which our audience may or may not be familiar with. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about them?
Yes, definitely. So CSRD is a framework, a very comprehensive framework, very ambitious one, as we said. And CSRD is based on 12 pillars, what we called the 12 ESRS, meaning the 12 European Sustainability Reporting Standards. And as you can see, these ESRS are fully comprehensive. You've got 2 general ones. After that, you've got 5 dedicated to environmental issues, climate, but also pollution, water, biodiversity, circular economy. Then you're going to have 4 ESRS dealing with social issues, your own workforce, but also workers in your value chain, consumers as well, and end users. And finally, you're going to have 1 additional ESRS, one dealing with governance issues, meaning the way you have to conduct your business, the way you have to manage your go-to-market. So as you can see, those 2 pillars are the 2, let's say, basements of the whole CSRD framework. And for each of them, you're going to have to populate many indicators. As I have said earlier, more than 1,200 indicators to be populated. And to answer your question, Laura, it means that this CSRD regulation, definitely, it's not only a carbon reporting, is much more than that.
It certainly sounds like a lot of disparate information that needs to be aggregated and processed. Can you explain a bit about how perhaps Sweep platform can help with all of this?
Yeah, with pleasure. So Sweep is a data management platform. In Sweep, you're gonna have all the different ESRS, the 12 ESRS just discussed. All those ESRS have been directly integrated within Sweep. And thanks to Sweep, you will be able to collect, track, monitor all the data you need for all the different ESG indicators, for all the different ESRS required by the CSRD regulation. And all those data will be automatically filled in the different ESRS indicators. So thanks to Sweep, you will be able to edit your CSRD report. You will be able to make your CSRD disclosure. But more than that, which is absolutely crucial, all the data in Sweep will be auditable. Thanks to audit trail, audit log, specific workflow management, you will be able to provide your auditor with all the data and get easily auditor validation. This is absolutely essential. To sum up, thanks to Sweep, you will save time. You will find the best way to collect, track all the data you need. You're gonna have the best tool to be sure that at the end of the day, you're gonna be compliant with the CSRD. You'll probably be able to save money, and you will be able to be sure that at the end of the day, you will get easily your audit validation. This is a big challenge because to disclose and to be compliant with the CSRD is not so easy, but thanks to Sweep, and probably thanks to this partnership between Sweep and Arcadia, you could find a good partner to be able to achieve the CSRD ambitious. And probably, Laura, this could be a good moment to talk about the combination of Sweep and Arcadia, how Sweep and Arcadia will help companies to meet those requirements.
Yeah, sounds good. I'd love to show a quick breakdown of what we do here at Arcadia and how our combined solution can support these compliance needs. There's two main ways Arcadia's platform adds value. We automate utility data collection for carbon-related metrics, and we normalize, transform, and deliver that data in a reporting-friendly way. Automating data collection is very helpful, as Julien mentioned, because it can dramatically reduce the amount of time your team spends on just getting the raw data in one place. So you're just getting started here. No longer needing to track down countless spreadsheets, manual copy pasting, and chasing down different teams for the information you need. The time and effort we can save for your teams become really significant when you're dealing with hundreds or thousands of sites. After we aggregate the raw data in one place, our platform streamlines the next steps in your reporting process by transforming the data into insights. With decades of energy data expertise, we know how to deal with ins and outs of utility data, which widely varies from provider to provider. And we do the nuanced work of interpreting the data for you and making it available via our data warehouse. Analysts at your teams could then easily interact with your data through writing simple SQL queries or downloading the reports. Here's one specific example that could help to illustrate how our expertise in interpreting utility data will help you to save time and headaches down the line. So in many parts of the US, even though energy is consumed once, 2 bills will be issued. So this gets really fun. One of the bills is from an energy supplier and one from the energy distributor. This dynamic oftentimes leads to double counting for energy consumption, which is the last thing you'd want when you're reporting for compliance reasons. Given that there are a huge number of utility providers in the US, as you can probably imagine, the way this dynamic manifests in the data varies widely from provider to provider. So simple pattern matching or perhaps just learning the behavior of one utility is not going to be sufficient. Our algorithms here at Arcadia, on the other hand, understands these edge cases, and we can handle the deduplication for you. With Arcadia and Sweep's platform combined, you get a solution that reduces the need for time-consuming manual efforts by Arcadia providing meter or site-level aggregated usage data for various service types, such as electricity, natural gas, and water. Sweep then takes that data set, transforms that into carbon impact calculations, scope 1 and 2 measurements, and additional reporting analytics, like the many that Julien mentioned before, to make sure that you're ready to stay compliant. Our goal is to handle these nuances for you that's required to stay compliant with evolving regulation, so you can focus on growing your business. Following that quick overview, I have maybe one more question for Julien. Here at Arcadia, we often talk about how compliance with EU sustainability regulation isn't just an obligation. It creates new business opportunities for US companies as well. Would you be able to tell us more about what kinds of opportunities you see emerging?
Yeah, definitely this is a very good question, Laura. And maybe some points to answer your question. So first, many US companies will have to apply and will have to comply with CSRD. If they don't, then they could have penalties, meaning financial penalties. They could have market restriction and blah, blah, blah. Second point, very important, as we discussed earlier, since you've got already, at the time being, EU enterprises and EU large companies that will have to apply from now the CSRD regulation, it means that they will change from now their own procurement rules. One example, if I am, let's say, a big EU enterprises, I have to apply CSRD regulation. I have to comply with this regulation. And this regulation will ask me to reduce my carbon footprint, including the scope 3 of my carbon footprint. What I'm gonna do? I'm gonna ask my own suppliers to provide me with lower carbon footprint product, because it's gonna be a way for me to reduce my own carbon footprints, since I will reduce the carbon footprint of my procurement policy. So it means that at the time being, even if you don't have to apply CSRD regulation, if you have any business with huge EU enterprises, probably they will ask you to reduce in advance and to apply in advance the CSRD regulation. And third, it's not only a matter of business, it's also probably a matter of financial market. I mean, more and more investors, private equity firms, asset managers, all over the world, and especially in the EU, but not only in the EU. This is totally true as well for UK investor and US investor. More and more of those investors are currently asking for CSRD compliancy. Why? Just because this is a way to protect value. By being compliant with the CSRD, those investors are totally confident in the fact that they're gonna protect value. Because on the opposite, if you are not compliant with the CSRD, probably it could be a way to destroy a part of the value of your companies. And last but not least, as we discussed, CSRD is not only a disclosure framework, it's also a way to set up transition plan for your company. And those transition plan are also a way to save money. Just one example, if you want to replace carbon product by a lower carbon product, for many sectors, it's a way of cost efficiency at the same time. So above all, those transition plans are a way to be sustainable on your market, probably to get some cost efficiency, for sure to get some key business advantages, and at the end of the day, to protect the value of your enterprise. So here you have some different examples of what does it mean, CSRD, in a market point of view? And I think it's a very important question. It's not only a question for EU company at the time being, it's probably also a question for many US companies.
Thank you for sharing all of the potential opportunities out there for the businesses. Definitely leaves us a lot to think about. That's all the time we have so far for our chat. I've really enjoyed this, Julien. So thank you so much for spending the time for myself and the audience. I will pass it back to Catherine to see if we have any questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Laura. Yeah, we absolutely do have questions from our audience, and we're still happy to take more. So if after listening to all of that, you have new questions for Laura, for Julien, then please do put them in the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. So the first one that I'm going to put to you, it's to Julien. And the question was, does the CSRD apply to your European entities only if you're US based, or does it apply to the entire corporation? So over to you, Julien.
No, definitely this regulation will not to be applied only by EU companies. And this is very important point. Probably this is the first time that you get an EU regulation with some impact outside the EU area. And probably this is a very, very, let's say, big change regarding the impact of the EU regulation. So when you are an EU company, you will have to apply CSRD regulation in advance compared to the no or non-EU companies. But let's say you are a US companies with a legal entity within the EU area. What does it mean, a legal entity? This is a proper entity, legal one, even if this legal entity is belonging to US group. So I've got one entity in France, in Germany, wherever within the EU area. If this legal entity, even if 100% of this company is owned by a US group, if this company will at least two of the following points, will have more than 250 employees, or more than 50 million euros of net turnover, or more than 25 million euros of balance sheet. So if this legal entity will fit with at least two of those points, then the company, the EU legal entity, will have to apply CSRD by 2026 based on 2025 fiscal year, okay? And the second point, if you are a US group, so meaning that you are a US parent company located in the US, okay? You don't have a legal entity in EU, but you are making business with the EU. Then you're gonna have to apply CSRD by 2029 based on 2028 fiscal year if you fit the following criteria. First, to get a net turnover exceeding 150 million euros in the last 2 years within the EU area. And at the same time, if you have either a subsidiary or a branch within the EU entity, EU area. So as you can see on this table, the timelines are very precise. And it means that for many, many reasons, you will be concerned by the CSRD. And once again, on top of that, you're going to have many of your EU buyer, which will ask you to apply CSRD in advance, even if you are not concerned, just because then those guys will have to apply CSRD. And so the best way to apply CSRD is to ask their own suppliers to be aligned with the CSRD requirements. So definitely the US company will be concerned.
Thank you, Julien. I hope that answered the question for the anonymous attendee who put that into our Q&A box. We have a question for Laura as well. Somebody's saying to us, this all sounds great. what you're talking about with data platforms, but how do I convince my CTO to add another element to our tech stack? How easily does Arcadia integrate with existing tech stacks? I'm sure many CTOs are asking that question, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. I think we're very much aware that we don't want to be adding more work while trying to make something easier. So we've invested in a lot of efforts trying to make it as easy as possible for customers to get started in a really smooth way. So currently, you're actually able to interact with our data sets via simple SQL queries through our data warehouse. So if you prefer a solution where no engineering work is required for any integration, you would be able to interact with data presented in a data warehouse. In this case, we're using Snowflake, which is commonly used by other businesses as well, in quite a seamless way to get started. So I think this is something where we're trying to make the onboarding time as short as possible, so then we can carry on with our reporting needs to ensure that businesses are compliant.
Thanks very much, Laura. More questions coming in. They're coming thick and fast now. We have another anonymous attendee asking us, does this regulation, the CSRD, also apply to Canadian companies with entities in Europe? Julien, that's one for you.
Yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, we are discussing a lot regarding the US companies, but it will be exactly the same timeline for the Canadian companies. Actually, this timeline is due for all the non-EU companies, including US, including Canadian companies, and other ones. So yes, definitely the answer is positive.
Thanks very much, Julien. Yes, so Canada also implicated here, even though we headlined this as US companies, it is indeed third countries to the European Union, as they're called. A question to Laura now. How long does it take to set up my company's automated data collection with Arcadia?
Great question. I think I'll first start with perhaps the different components outlining what is required for this setup. And then I'll touch on typical timeframes that we've seen in the past with some of our existing customers. So for automated data collection, especially for utility data, we would require the login credentials for your energy or utility account. So a big part of this depends on whether your teams have that readily available, or do we need to start collecting that from scratch, perhaps from building owners or office managers, et cetera. So that would be the first step, getting the credentials in place. And for energy consumption locations that does not have credentials readily available, we're also able to take in bills, so monthly statements or invoices. So getting those documents to us would also facilitate the setup process. So once we get these things in place, it's then a simple matter of setting up that connection. For a lot of utilities, we're actually able to set up the connection instantly. So as soon as you enter your credentials details, so your login, username, and password, we will be able to establish a connection instantly and successfully. And in that case, after that, data will start to come in relatively soon as well. So there's a couple of steps, as I mentioned, that would need to happen as we get this entire setup process figured out for one business. Typically, we see for our customers with, say, 50 sites or above, that this process would run a couple of months. And sometimes it might vary depending on, say, data availability or perhaps planning, how we plan it out on both sides. So that gives you kind of like a high level time frame of how long perhaps people should expect. But the data connection itself, that part is mostly instant, which is really helpful when we want to start validating some of the data points that are starting to come in and starting to get the reporting pipeline set up. Once the framework is there, it will just be a matter of feeding in more data and growing the tables for reporting, if you will.
Thank you, Laura. That was a great explanation there. We have a question, pretty quick to answer, from another anonymous attendee. How many companies have already submitted CSRD reports?
Actually, it's pretty difficult to answer this question just because the first bunch of EU companies will, roughly speaking, will be something like 10,000 companies that will have to apply CSRD by 2025 based on 2024 fiscal year. So it means that at the time being, the company are competing the CSRD, are populating the world indicators, are assessing the double materiality, are making the discussion with the auditors, are computing all the data into or within the XBRL format and blah, blah, blah. And they will send the CSRD report in 2025. So the number of reports already sent to the EU Commission is a few for sure, but it will be absolutely massive in the coming year. And it's a few, but just because they're gonna have to send it in a couple of months, but it means that at the time being, they're working on it. So I cannot answer with a precise number, but for sure, it's a huge number that's gonna publish their own CSRD report in the coming months.
Thanks very much, Julien. We have another question about how to actually go about doing this reporting. Again, to Julien, I think perhaps, are European companies getting external consultants to help them with this CSRD reporting? It sounds quite complex, the person says. Or are companies actually doing their compliance reports by themselves?
To be totally transparent, you are totally right to say that this regulation is complex. It doesn't mean that it's not necessary, but it's complex just because it's a very, very comprehensive regulation. You have those 1,200 indicators, you've got those 12 ESRS pillars and blah, blah, blah. So it's very complex. It's not dealing only with carbon, but also with all the environmental KPIs. It's dealing with social issues, with governance issues. So yeah, definitely it's very complex. But this complexity you can handle with thanks to first a data approach. We discuss it a lot, and this is the purpose of SWIP plus Arcadia partnership to address this data project and data approach. First point. Second point, to have a good choice at the first time, meaning that you need to have a tool, a data tool, data management platform, but with data auditable. And this point is absolutely crucial. Everyone proposing you to have, let's say, a data management platform, but at the end of the day, the data are not auditable. It's absolutely a mistake. You need to have all the data auditable, since at the end of the day, you need to get a stamp from an auditor. And to answer the question, at the first step, this is the double materiality approach. What does it mean? It means that you need to assess the impact of your company on the market and the environment, and the impact of the environment on your company. This is the impact materiality, financial materiality. And to do that, it needs to be customized. It needs to fit with your company criteria. And this point, plus the implementation of the data project, for those 2 points, yes, the answer is yes. We are working a lot with implementation partners, meaning these big companies you can imagine, telling you some advices, making you the double materiality assessment or the gap analysis, and implementing the tool within the company. The best way is to get this data management platform as Sweep and Arcadia, and in the other hand, to have this implementation partner. This is the best way to address CSRD regulation when you are an enterprises or a large companies with very complex issues. If you are a small companies, the day when you're going to have to apply with CSRD, probably we will find simple way to make it, thanks to AI, for instance. At Sweep, we did invest a lot on AI, providing you with some simple tool. But when you are a large company or an enterprises, for sure, the best way to address CSRD regulation is to get this, let's say, a partnership between an implementation partner plus a data management platform.
Thanks, Julien. So we've come almost to the end of our questions from our audience. Thank you so much for sending so many in to us. So this will be the last one. Just a quick question, really. Are Sweep and/or Arcadia already working with North American companies for CSRD?
Yes, and it's actually really exciting in the past to see how our partnership has grown. We have folks like major logistics management companies, travel advisory companies, all reaching out to us and getting this partnership, really utilizing what we're able to provide through this partnership to help them with these compliance reporting needs. And it's been quite exciting from our perspective to see how much of this reporting process, as Julien was outlining to us throughout the presentation, have been streamlined for these companies, and how much time and effort we're saving them. So it's been an exciting journey so far to start helping more and more customers, and we expect to see a lot more traction in this in the coming months as well.
Yes, we're already up and running, getting customers ready for CSRD. Well, thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, Julien, for answering those questions. A big thanks to everybody who's joined the webinar today. It's been so lovely to see so many of you joining us. As you can see on screen, we've got a couple of QR code links to some resources that we thought might be helpful for you. So on the left there, you see some CSRD specific resources that Sweep has prepared. And on the right, Arcadia's a link to speak to Arcadia to find out more about how Arcadia can help you with CSRD reporting as well. So that's it from us for now. Thank you so much once again to everybody. If you want to get in touch with us, we're on LinkedIn, of course. You can find out how to contact us on our websites as well. And we hope to see you at another webinar in the future. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.